Welcome back to Level Yourself. I am your host, Jance, alongside my ladies, Liz and Camille.
Oh,
Hey
welcome back.
guys.
Hi, ladies. Today's episode on Level Yourself is very, very special. Level Yourself is about sharing positive energy, bringing awareness of every individual's values, constant reminders of self worth and motivation. Now, we all know that life is not easy, and there are so many obstacles and challenges that arise on a daily basis. On today's episode, we invited a special guest by the name of Michael Hunsberger. Um, Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Michael shares with us how he is a living example of overcoming challenges. Thank you so much for being on our podcast, Michael.
It's my pleasure.
Now, we know Michael through our amazing host, Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hi, guys.
Tell us a little bit about how you met Michael.
All right. So, as everybody knows, I moved over to the West Coast, and no family out here, just my little family, my husband and the kids. And it is Christmas Eve, and one of my colleagues from work said, "Hey, why don't you come over for dinner? And for Christmas Eve, we'll play games, we'll eat, hang out." I was super excited. So the family heads over there, and at the house, there is this guy. So nice guy, but seemed very distant. Like he didn't really want to talk too much to us. Like, who are these people? So I knew that there's something about this guy, but I wasn't really sure what it was. About a week later, I'm talking to my colleague, and he tells me this amazing story, a truly inspirational story. That when he's telling me the story, I have chills. I'm like, oh my God, this person is so amazing. This is your friend? He's like, yes, it's my friend. And then he's like, you met him. He was at my house for Christmas Eve. And I was like, what? I knew that there was something about this guy. And now it all makes sense. So it was like synchronicity to a point. So I just wanted to obviously bring him on. And I know he has a story about why he came on. So Mike, you want to tell us about that little interaction that you had a little while ago?
Sure. So I work on Camp Pendleton. Um, Basically, I teach Marines how to shoot down bad guys in airplanes.
Cool.
So we have this little PX that is near my office. And so I go there. The usual cashier wasn't there, and it was this strange woman I'd never seen before. And she's only been there once to my knowledge. So I get my stuff, I walk up to the counter, and like just out of nowhere, she says, "Are you married?" I said I was, but my wife passed away. She said, "What was her name?" I said, "Jessica." And she said, how long were you together? And I'm in my brain, I'm thinking, why is she asking me so many questions about
Yeah.
Jess? So I'm like, well, we were together about 11 years, almost 12 years. We were married for 9. And then she says, I just got chills. Um, I feel like I'm gonna cry. Your wife is here, and
Oh, wow.
um, she asked me, can I give you a hug? And I'm like, okay. So she walks around the counter and she gives me a hug, and her eyes are welled up with tears. And she walks back around the counter, grabs a scrap piece of receipt paper, and scribbles something on it and passes it to me. And the note says, write a book. Everyone wants to hear your story.
Wow.
Now, the reason that that's significant is because everybody I tell my story to says, you should write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a writer. I don't know the first thing about writing a book. So I can barely speak for one. So I
No.
kind of ignored it, and But the day before that, I had two friends tell me I need to write a book. Like, be serious about it. My friend Tamika has been on me since she met me to write a book. So I texted her, I texted my mom, I texted one of my sisters, and I said, this is the night before this woman tells me this. I said, I'm really thinking, I'm really considering writing this book. So the
Wow.
next day, I go in and I prayed about it that morning. I'm like, Father, please tell me my next step. And then I go to the PX and boom, this woman, this strange woman who I never met before, starts telling me my wife's there. And then she writes that on a piece of paper. And it just kind of freaked me out.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Mike, I'm an intuitive myself and also a medium, and this happens to me a lot when I go out in public and I pick up on people's past loved ones, but I haven't got the nerve to do that, like to tell a stranger, like I have a message, but do you really feel that the message came from your wife? Because I know that's something this is true. Like this is real. Liz mentioned to me the story, and I started to cry because I said, "Wow, that's the sign and the message that you needed. That's your third sign. Like that's it. You know, there goes your book. You're gonna start writing a book."
It actually was my third sign in that
Mm-hmm.
Jessica has given two people who were strangers to me at the time messages for me.
Wow.
So after I got let's see, after she passed away, I had a friend's mom give me a message that she doesn't even remember. She went to bed and she came to the back of the house. After she went to bed, she shows up at the doorway of the back of the house, calls me over, and gives me this message from my wife about things that only I knew about. Like, I
Wow.
didn't tell her anything. And then a friend of mine who's a really dear friend now, Monique, she also gave me a message about stuff that I was only praying about. Like, only I knew those things. And she was
Wow.
telling me a message from Jessica about those things. So this strange woman at the cashier, it totally caught me off guard. But at the same time, it wasn't completely out of the ordinary because it had happened to me before.
Wow.
So now you're starting to see how she's trying to communicate, and basically what you're praying for, you're getting the messages, you're getting signs for you to move forward. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's the phrase "move forward" is very strange because there's a part of you,
Hmm.
when the person that, in my case, the person I loved most in the world, she passed away, and it leaves this permanent hole inside of you that you can't fill with anything else. And time kind of freezes in that moment when you're in it. It freezes, and everybody else's life kind of moves on. And
Yeah.
because you lost your entire future and everything you were working for, it freezes and you don't know where to go. So I would say, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm moving on because that part of your life is you can't feel it. But what you can do is grow.
Right.
So if you consider that growth moving on, then I guess you could say I'm moving on. But I've learned how to grow since then. So,
I
Yeah.
remember you talking to me about you and Jessica were kind of never separated.
yeah.
She did have an illness, and um, she wound up leaving this time. And then when she did leave you, that's when she did pass away.
Mhm.
Um, I know. Can you tell us like a little bit about that?
Sure. Um, I I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. Sometimes when I talk about Jessica, I still get emotional. Sometimes I don't. It just depends on what frame of mind I'm in. But her and I, from our first date until she passed away, if you added all the time together that we spent apart, it probably added up to about a week and a half. Because we were together every single day from our first date until she passed away. Um, we were just one of those couples that loved being in the same room together. We had to be together all the time. And if we weren't doing anything in the same, like if we were spending that time on the couch or whatever, like we had to be touching in some kind of way. But she ended up going to Texas uh, sh- to take care of her grandfather because he was in the hospital. And she was born with a genetic disease called sickle cell. I don't know if
Mm.
y'all know anything about
Yeah,
sickle cell,
yeah.
but it's a blood disease that affects everything about your life. I used to enjoy jumping out of closets and scaring folks. I tortured my mom like that as a child. I couldn't do that to her because it would literally put her in the hospital because the race of blood, from the adrenaline would start hurting her real bad. Um, so she goes to Texas and she starts about maybe 2 weeks in, she starts to have sickle cell pain. They call it a crisis, a sickle cell crisis. And the day before she was supposed to come home, she was hurting so bad that her uncle made her go to the hospital. She wasn't going to go. She called me crying saying, "I just want to come home." I said, "You got one more day, baby. Just hang on. You'll get home and then I'll take care of you." And so she ended up in the hospital and she ended up dying before her grandfather.
Oh wow. I'm sorry. So sorry. Do you? Yep. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when and I totally understand why this is now, but when I would go visit her in the hospital, a lot of times, I would sleep there if I could with her in the hospital. And she was in and out of the hospital probably 6 times a year. Um, so if I could, I'd sleep there. If I couldn't, I'd come home and take care of laundry and stuff and then go back to the hospital, go to
Mhm.
work, go back to the hospital. And every time I showed up, her face would just light up. It
Hmm.
was kind of like she could feel the love that I was giving her, and she was feeding off that love to heal.
Wow.
Um, so me not being there with her in the hospital in Texas, I think had a lot to do with it. I feel like if I were there, she may have made it
Mm.
because we basically fed off of each other. And
Mm.
I can tell you later why I've come to that conclusion. And it's basically, you know, I was able to do that with my family when they came out when I was in the hospital.
So talk to us a little bit about that. You you ended up in the hospital. What you ended up in the hospital, and can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So after Jess passed, I totally went on a downward spiral. Um, the grieving shows itself physically in a lot of ways. So
Mm.
um, I was I all I wanted when she died was to be with her. So I was absolutely 100% set on dying young. I was suicidal, but I was too afraid to take my life because I always heard that if you take your life, you end up in hell.
Mm.
And, I didn't want to chance it. All I wanted was to be with her. That's
Wow.
it, period. So I couldn't take my own life, so I had to suffer this life. But the pain of being away from her was tremendous. I mean, after she died, I was literally in my bedroom on my knees in the dark praying to God to take my life. Like anything but the pain. I wanted anything but the pain. And I couldn't get that because it was just 100% pure pain. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And I felt like God's just not fucking answering the phone today. I
Wow.
felt absolutely nothing. It was complete emptiness.
Mm.
And it didn't shake my faith in God. Like I didn't not believe in God, but I felt like I didn't understand.
Right.
Mhm.
So you take that. I started having broken heart syndrome, and that's basically your heart stops. And every time my heart would stop, I'd look up in the air and be like, "Is this it, Father? Because I'm ready to go. Let's do this."
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
So, and I actually told Jessica's brother, Atticus. I told him, I said, "Brother, look, if we're out somewhere and I fall over dead, you better not revive me. I want you to promise." I made him promise. I
Wow.
was like, "You promise right now that you're not going to try to bring me back to life because I don't want to come back." He actually promised. I think he kind of understood at the time.
Hmm.
So eventually, you know, people go on with their lives and they think that, you're slowly healing. Well, I wasn't healing. I was just holding it in when I would go out in public. So I started having panic attacks to the point where I couldn't leave my bedroom to go to work. So my job was nice enough to let me have some time because initially you only get like 2 weeks to grieve for a loved one. Um, so I've had the panic attacks and then the broken heart syndrome, uh, which I already covered.
Right.
And then I developed an uncontrollable tremor in my left hand. That was interesting because you kind of have to hide it from people. Like sometimes my hand would start to shake and I'd like put it in my pocket.
Wow.
Um,
With that, did you get any other like symptoms, or it was just the tremor? You didn't feel it coming on, or
no, I didn't feel it coming on. Like the symptoms for my tremor, there was none whatsoever. Uh, it would just my hand would just start shaking, but I would kind of feel I would feel the pain beforehand, like the physical grief. I would feel the grief beforehand, and then because I was usually out somewhere, shopping or at work, and I couldn't show what I was feeling inside, and so it would cause a tremor in my hand. But I didn't feel any physical symptoms. My hand would just start to shake. So there there was actually a lot of physical things happening at that time. Um, so the grief made me. I was drinking a lot. That didn't help. Um,
mm,
and so you sort of fast forward 5 years. So 5 years of that, basically with PTSD symptoms and stuff like that. Or
mm,
so I have a retired Marine Corps friend who is convinced that I had PTSD from losing Jess.
mm,
Um, so 5 years of that, and I started getting uh, what I thought were tension headaches.
mhm.
Um, it actually started from the lilac fires. I don't know if you remember those,
Yes.
but yeah, it was basically North County, San Diego was burning from a fire started from a car on the highway, and there's a dry riverbed that runs right behind my house, and the fire was literally coming down that dry riverbed to the point where I could actually, when it became nighttime, I could see the flames above the trees from my house. And so I was terrified because it was coming right towards my house. The wind was blowing it down that river bed towards my house. And I thought I was going to lose everything because my house had become a museum, a Jessica museum.
Mm,
And people would come in the house and I'd be like, don't, this is how she left it. Don't touch anything. Just leave it the way it
uh,
is. So um, I thought if the fire hits, I'm gonna lose everything. So I ended up I was house sitting down the street, and literally took the people's cars who I was house sitting for. I took two of their cars, drove them back to my house, filled their cars up. One of them was actually an SUV. Filled both of those up, drove them back, got my car, filled it up, and took it to their house. Anything that I could possibly stuff in there. So pictures off the walls, clothing, my guitars, just anything that had any value. you know,
Hmm.
knowing that I'm going to lose everything else. So the stress of that, having to decide what I'm going to take, was terrible because it was a museum to Jessica, like my whole house.
Right.
And it's like, what the hell am I going to take? You know, I have no idea what I'm going to take.
Wow.
So I was stressing about that. And that kind of got the ball rolling as far as the symptoms that put me in the hospital. So I started having what I thought were tension headaches. After my house luckily did not burn down and I
Hmm.
came back to it, um, for about 3 months, I had these tension headaches, and my vision in my left eye started to blur.
Mm.
And I started seeing, like, you know how if you look at a light bulb, or and then you
Mhm.
close your eyes and you can still see the outline of the light bulb.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that, but it was in the middle of my eye permanently.
Wow.
So I kind of ignored it until I started peeing blood. And when I would turn my head, I would lose the hearing in whichever ear I was turning towards.
Oof.
So one day, it was a Friday. The pain was so bad in my head. I'm like, and I'm peeing blood and the hearing and everything. I'm like, I got to go to the doctor.
Right.
So I left work early and I go to the doctor's office, and um, the nurse comes and gets me, and we're kind of palling around and I'm joking with her and stuff, and she puts the blood pressure cuff on me. And after the first reading, like, we're laughing and carrying on, and she stops mid sentence, and she's like, "That can't be right." So she takes my blood pressure again. She's like, "I'm gonna go get the doctor." She goes and gets the doctor. He comes back. Doctor puts the blood pressure cuff on me, takes my blood pressure, and he's like, that's not right." He goes and gets another machine, brings it back, takes my blood pressure, and he says, "I'm calling the ambulance. You're going to the emergency room right now." I'm like,
Wow.
what the hell's going on? So the
Right.
ambulance comes and gets me, and um, as we're driving over to the emergency room, the the paramedic was like, "Dude, I can't believe you're still walking around. Like, this is the highest blood pressure I've ever seen," which is the same thing the doctor and the nurse both said. He's like, your blood pressure's 315 over 268.
Wow.
So
That's
for those,
crazy.
yes, so those who don't know, normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. So I
Hmm.
was well beyond that. I was like off the charts. I should have stroked out long before that. So uh, you know, I get to the emergency room, and as they're carting me into the ER, that's when I had my first stroke. It
Mm.
showed itself as a seizure. Uh, that was the that was the result of the stroke, was a seizure. So the doctors actually thought I was having seizures. Instead, I was having the strokes, which was causing the seizures. So in the first 24 hours, I had two seizures slash strokes. Um, and I actually don't remember. I remember them carting me into the ER, and from that point on, I didn't really know what my physical body was going through. Um, I have some recollections and some, but a big span of it I don't recall because I really wasn't in my body.
Mm.
Um, so uh, a- after the strokes, my body started filling up with fluid, and my eyes were getting big, and apparently I kept saying that I thought they were going to pop out of my head.
Wow.
But what was happening was my lungs, the little alveoli, the little air exchange
Hmm.
balloons in your lungs, started to burst, and my
Mm.
lungs were filling up with water and blood. So I had basically had bloody pneumonia. Um, and they intubated me, and so they stuck the tube down my throat. And there was a nurse there. Uh, I don't know if it was 24/7, but it was constantly, and she was basically sucking all the tissue and the blood and the water and the gunk out of my lungs.
Hmm.
And so, because my blood pressure was still high and they were having trouble controlling it, my it started to take its effect on my other organs. So my kidneys shut down completely, and they put me on dialysis. So when they put me on dialysis, it actually dropped my blood pressure too low, and my heart stopped. So the the same nurse that was actually taking care of my lungs, she told the doctors they have to take me off dialysis because um, I wanted my own blood back.
Mm-hmm.
I got all this knowledge secondhand, but that's the quote that I heard from her, that she said was that I wanted my own blood back. So they took me off dialysis and my heart started back up.
But you didn't physically say that to her. This is her feeling like that's what you needed, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like her instinct about me. Is that
Because you were in a medically induced coma at the
right?
time.
Exactly. Okay, so basically, I nearly escaped the tracheotomy because I was at the full 14 days for intubation. So that I'm glad to hear that because I don't want a hole in my throat.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
So basically, at that point, I went to sleep, if you will, with one body. I was about 220 pounds, and within basically a 2 week span, I went down to 168, and
Wow.
I looked like those commercials with the Ethiopian kids, where you're all like skin and bones, except you got the big old distended belly. Like
Right.
I
Yeah.
totally looked like that. Like I remember the first time I was able to actually lift the covers, and I looked down at myself and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's
Wow.
ridiculous." Like
What happened?
I didn't recognize any part of my body at all.
Like you were a different Mike.
Yeah, completely. Well, and it's funny because when I started coming to out of my coma, uh, I couldn't move. Like my muscles had atrophied so badly that I couldn't move. The first time I tried to sit up, I fell over like a baby. You set a baby on the couch and they just fall over on their face. It's exactly what happened to me.
Wow.
Um, I could barely lift my arms. I would get tired lifting my arms, trying to feed myself, which I also couldn't do because I had completely lost all the dexterity in my hands. My mom actually had to feed me, and that was really embarrassing because you got all these like hot nurses coming in and out the room, and I'm like, no, I swear I'm a man. It was, I, by the time I was done in the hospital, I had lost all my dignity. Like
Oh, wow.
everybody had seen me naked, like, in the worst possible conditions.
Yeah.
Not to be too graphic, but I couldn't control my bodily functions. And
Mhm.
so I was constantly just like defecating on myself and peeing on myself. Like they didn't even bother putting pants on me because it was going to be gone. They lined my bed with diapers and stuff. And I just
Wow.
couldn't control it. And I was embarrassed every time somebody had to come in and clean me up. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. All I could do was apologize.
Right.
So
So who
what?
who was there to support you during that time?
So my sister Chrissy, she's my youngest sister, and my mom came out initially. They immediately flew out because I guess I don't really remember this, but I guess I called them from the ambulance
Okay.
and said, "Hey, um, I'm going to the emergency room. I think you need to fly out."
Wow.
So I was sort of in and out from there. Uh, and apparently, I would. They had to tie me down. They had to strap me down to the bed, and I broke the first straps that they put on me because I kept trying to pull the tube out of my face.
Mhm.
Wow.
And so they got other straps and tied them underneath the bed so I couldn't break them. But I also kept waking up. Apparently, this is all news to me, but apparently I kept waking up and using my grandfather's favorite motto. Basically, it was the motto he lived by, which was "strong like bull."
Wow.
Like he used to always
Wow.
say that to me when I was a kid, and I kept waking up and saying that. So, um, no, I'm sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. Okay, so my
No, it's
my
okay.
sister and my
So,
mom were there, and then my sister ran out of time that she could visit, so my dad flew out, and it was the two of them, and then I have some retired Marine Corps friends who are amazing people. They were there to help. Adon, Monique, Mike, my buddy Mike, and Jeff, my other friend Jeff, and then Mike's son Chris also came. So they were
you had
there
a
to help.
support system there to help you, kind of.
I did. When I started coming to out of my coma, I didn't sleep at all because I was determined. For whatever reason, I had this overabundance of willpower, and I was just determined to get the hell up out of that hospital. When my family would leave, their love, they would go to my house to stay to sleep, and it was almost like the love left the room, and I had
Wow.
nothing to really feed
Wow.
off of, so I had to like dig within myself to to find strength. And the first thing I had to do was get my hands to work.
Mm.
So I would order those like little tiny milk cartons that you have to peel them open. And
Mm-hmm.
those
Yeah.
things are impossible for regular people. Like
Literally.
Right.
when you got crippled hands that don't work, it looks
Wow.
ridiculous. But I knew if I could just get one of those open, my dexterity would start to come back. So I just ordered one milk after the other until I was able to pour one in my cereal and use a spoon to eat the cereal. So it kind of built from there because I couldn't walk. That was the main thing is I couldn't walk, and the doctors weren't going to let me out of the hospital unless I could walk with a walker. So this was a real adventure because when you realize that y- you're telling your body to do stuff and it's not responding, it kind of fucks with your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
But the first time I tried to walk, I was so sick of messing on myself. I wanted to just go to the bathroom like a damn man. Like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was determined to get up out of that bed and walk to the bathroom and go to the bathroom. So I waited till everybody left my room because my family and my friends were there. Obviously, the nurses are there. I wait till they all leave, and I'm like, I'm getting the hell up out of this bed and I'm gonna walk. So I scooch over to the edge of the bed and I push myself up, and my hips felt like Bambi when Bambi was born.
Right, 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 right.
Falling on it,
Oh
like
wow.
just weak
Yeah.
and wobbly. And I'm like, this is gonna be tough, but I can do it. And I took my first step forward and planted my foot on the ground, and I instantly just went face first right into the wall. It was
Ouch.
Wow.
like
Oh,
I was like,
ouch.
blam, and like everybody comes running in. Oh my God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
All
Oh
this
my
stuff. I'm
god.
like, seriously? And then I started getting yelled at, and my mom's like, you need to call for help. And the only person who didn't yell at me was my dad, because
Wow.
I'm like, I'm a man, damn it, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't stand not being able to do for myself. And he was the only one that kind of was like on my side, sort of the voice of reason. Like I think he kind of understood, like, you know, he needs to be able to do for himself, and if that means falling on his face,
Right.
then and we just got to help him get back up.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that. That was immense. Like it sounds like a small thing, but it's absolutely a game changer. But, of course, everybody's telling me, you're the most stubborn person I've ever met in my life. Yeah, you're damn right I am. Uh, they say it like it's a bad thing, but I knew what was best for me. Like, I'm the only one living in this body, and I'm the one that knows best for me what to do. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care how smart the doctors are, what school they went to. I don't care. My mama, like, doesn't matter. Like, I'm living in this body. I'd got to do what I got to do to make it work. So that was a real
Mike,
adventure.
Mike, can you just enlighten us with how long ago this was?
Actually, it was almost 1 year ago today. I think
This
a
is
year ago today
this is
when
what
I,
boggles my mind. Go ahead, go
What?
ahead. Talk. Sorry.
yeah, actually a year ago today is about when I got out the hospital.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So
So no, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, from the time that I came to out of my coma until the day I left the hospital was 6 days. They were trying to keep me 2 more weeks than I wanted to be there. The doctors were saying, "Yeah, if you can walk with a walker, we'll let you out of here." Well, in 6 days, I was able to walk with a walker by myself.
Wow.
It wasn't easy by any stretch, but I would sneak into the bathroom at night and hang on the sink trying to do squats just to strengthen my legs so I could walk. It took me 40 minutes to do one squat the first time I did it, and because I kept falling.
Wow.
And then the nurse would come knocking on the door. Are you okay in there? I'm like, yup, I'm fine. Just can't poo, that kind of thing. Like totally trying to get her out of the room. But they said I could go home if I could walk, so I was able to do that. They actually tried to trick me into staying an extra 2 weeks,
Oh, wow.
and I said, hell no. I literally got in a verbal fight with one of the nurses who told me I didn't have a choice. I trained for that. Basically, docs told me I need to be able to walk with a walker, and then they secretly tried to keep me there for 2 more weeks. So I thought they put me in a wheelchair. I thought they were going to let me go home with my family. And then they put me on the first floor, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? This is not cool. And the nurse is like, well, you're staying another 2 weeks and you don't have a choice. I was like, hell no.
Oh,
Like,
man.
I'm a free man. I got a choice. So we got in a verbal altercation, and I'm yelling at her, and she's yelling at me, and my family starts yelling at me. They're like,
Oh,
if you
my
need to stay
gosh.
2 weeks, my mom's crying,
Oh, my
you need to
goodness.
do this. And I'm like, I'm not fucking staying. Like, you don't get it. I'm going home with you. Because I knew if I stayed there another 2 weeks, it would kill my willpower because I
Mm.
was doing everything. They didn't get to see how hard I was working when they weren't there. I wasn't sleeping. I was literally trying to do squats. I
Wow.
made I made the nurse that night that I got down to the first floor. I made the nurse walk around with me for 2 hours around the hallways at like 3 in the morning.
Wow.
So I'm like, I'm getting out of here. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I'm getting out of here.
Wow.
So there I am with the walker for 2 hours. After the first hour, the nurse is like, are you done yet? I'm like, nope. And finally, after another hour of that, she's like, I'm done. She's like, my feet hurt. And I'm like, all right, fine. I won't torture you anymore. When my folks came in, the doctor came also and talked to me. And I said, look, I'm sorry about blowing up at Nurse Ratchet, but um, but you know, uh, you told me this, and that's what I want to do. I said, I'm getting out of here. Like, if you want to give me a bunch of tests, then give me all the tests you want, because I'm gonna show you I'm getting out of here. And they actually did give me a battery of tests, and he reluctantly signed off on it. He's like, look, I think you should stay. Everyone else here thinks you should stay. I said, well, I don't care what you think, and I don't care what they think, because they're not me, and you're not me. And he's like, okay. And he let me go. Um, so I didn't actually go home. That support system that I mentioned earlier, Adon and Monique, they're my two friends out here. They took me in. So my family would stay at my house and then drive down the street to their house and visit me during the daytime and nighttime. They spent as much time as possible with me. So the first night I was able to use a walker. Um, by the second night, I was using a cane to walk.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then by the third night, I was walking without any assistance. Now, it was ugly. Don't get me wrong. It was completely ugly. Like I was embarrassed. Like with just those people there, I wasn't embarrassed. But I, people tried to visit, that hadn't seen me yet, and I'm
Mhm.
like, hell no. Like I do not want anybody seeing me right now. Um, so yeah, and by the fifth day, I was able to do like a little jig, a little dance, like the John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever.
Wow.
Because my mom loves to dance, and we do this thing, we do like a jitterbug kind of thing. Because she's older. She's not old. She's older. Sorry, mom.
Older.
Um, so yeah, uh, and I was determined to work out every single day from the time I was in the hospital until now. Um, so it may seem like a miraculous. I mean, there were definitely miracles involved. Don't get me wrong. But most people don't get to see how much work I've put into getting to where I am now, and I still have some issues. I'm able to walk pretty much any distance I set my mind to. And I try to add in sprints, and my sprints are still very ugly. But I've realized that you can't grow without pain,
Mm.
and that you can't be embarrassed. I'm constantly running on base at lunchtime, and I know all the Marines can see me that I work with, and I have to just throw it out of my mind, like just toss it in the garbage. That embarrassment, it has to go in the garbage because I can't grow unless I'm willing to be embarrassed and hurt and feel the pain in my leg. And, because I still have problems with my left leg every once in a while. Because all the muscles in the tops of my thighs had died off, and I've slowly had to build it back up. With that came some nerve damage. It's called neuropathy. So I have a little bit of neuropathy in my left leg on top of my knee, and it causes me to have an ugly run.
Mm.
But you just got to keep pushing. That's all there is to it. Like, there are no excuses. Like, you have to do it every single day.
Yeah.
There's no excuses.
Yeah.
People who have
So
excuses are defeating themselves right out the gates.
that's true. No, I mean that's amazing.
Can you tell us
Technical
how
difficulty.
did you rehab mentally? How did you mentally rehabilitate yourself?
Um, well, it's pretty interesting what goes through your mind because there are three parts to your body. They say mind, body, and soul. Well, your body is controlled by your mind. It's kind of the sheep of the group. And your body's like, oh God, I don't want to do this. And sometimes your brain's like, you have to do it. And sometimes your brain is like, I'm sick of working out. Like the last thing I want to do is put shoes on and go out walking or running or, lifting or whatever. So your soul is the one that's in charge, and you have to realize that. And your soul is the one that has dominion over your body and your mind. So it's like, no, I don't care what you say, and I don't care what you say. We're getting at it today. We're going to get after it, and that's it. So you kind of have to, that's why you have to dig so deep into yourself to get over the pain and the tiredness and whatever else is ailing you. But the main thing that I kind of realized was that if I don't try my hardest, I'm basically shitting on all the prayers, all the tears, all the love that people had given me in order to
Wow.
get through everything.
Mhm.
And I just didn't want to do that. Um, it it would be a waste of all those things. Like that would mean if I didn't try, that means I made my mama cry for no reason at all. Um,
Wow.
so, all the hundreds of people who were praying for me, because I found out later that there were literally like 100 people or more praying for me. All that prayer would go to waste if I didn't try. And I wouldn't get to be like my grandfather who was strong like bull.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's
So
amazing.
he is the man that I've always wanted to be like when I grew up, and now that I'm growing up, I'm still trying to be like him. Um, Now I don't know if I should refer to this now, but um, when I was in the hospital, at one point, I mean, I actually was not in my body the entire time. There was a point where um, this is just one of many stories, but I was in complete darkness, and my grandfather came to visit me. And it's very hard to describe all this with words, because on the other side, you don't use words because you don't have a throat, like you don't have vocal cords. So you communicate through thoughts and feelings.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't see my grandfather, but I knew he was there. And he was basically telling me, like, look, you can't stay here. So get it out your mind that you're staying here. Because, I wasn't in heaven and I wasn't in hell. I was in limbo. But I had the desire to see Jessica. And he was basically telling me, like, nope, get it out your mind. You're not staying. Because I knew if I had seen her, I would have stayed. Like
Wow.
nothing was going to keep me from being with her.
Wow.
So he said, look, you're going back and you have to get stronger than you've ever been before. And it was almost like he was passing me strength,
Wow. Wow.
right? It was kind of like he knew I knew he was strong and he was sort of like passing this on to me somehow. Um, and he also said I had something big that I'm supposed to do. Um, and then I came back to my body. So I don't know what that big thing is, um, but sort of coming full circle back to the book, because that was sort of obvious. That's what I'm supposed to do is now write a book. Um, I think that's the next step to that big thing, you know. So I'm going to continue getting stronger than I've ever been before. And I'm probably never going to stop. As long as I'm on this earth, I'm going to keep going.
Wow.
And I just got to get to that big thing, whatever it may be. Um, when I woke up, I instantly wanted to help people. I just didn't know how to do it. I still don't know how I'm going to do it, but I wanted to help people and I wanted to ride a motorcycle. Because there's a freedom on the motorcycle that you don't get with any other form of transportation.
Hmm.
Uh, because I like the big hogs. Like I like when it sounds like two giant hammers just tearing up the road, like pop, 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 pop. With the brain bucket and the
Yeah.
sunglasses, 70 miles an hour. Yeah,
All right.
it's awesome. Um,
What's in Mike's future now? What do you see for Mike?
um, I'm honestly just taking it one step at a time. Um, when I actually planned a future, that was with Jessica, um, and that kind of fell through. So um, I'm just taking it one step at a time. It's in my heart to do what Grandpa told me to do.
Mm.
Get stronger than I've ever been before, and prepare for something big. So that's what I'm doing.
For all of our listeners and listening to your story, you've been through a lot of obstacles, right? You've been through love, mourning, health, overcoming a lot of adversities. What advice do you have for others who may be going through similar?
Well, what I would say is uh, the two biggest things are love and learning. Um, and I actually brought that back from the other side. At one point, I was sort of enveloped in God's love. Like
Wow.
it consumed I was just consumed with it. And in that, I learned that love and learning is basically the two biggest things that we have to do here on earth. And it's not necessarily unconditional love, like you don't let yourself be a doormat for somebody else. It's more love as in you have to love people how they need it and not how they want it, because
Yeah.
sometimes people don't know what they
Right. That's true.
so you know, in the hospital, my dad was loving me like let him get hurt because we can love him back up. We can help him up, and that's how we can love him right now. But he needs to learn, and he needs to. I was literally relearning everything from scratch, and that was the best way for me to learn. Um, and with learning, it's really learning about, in my opinion, it's learning about yourself. It's not like just going to school and learning what other people want you to learn. Like
Hmm.
you have to look at yourself in the mirror and basically face yourself. Like
Mm.
all the ugliness that's in you. Everybody's got ugliness. Everyone's got it inside them. There's something that they don't like about themselves that they can change. So that's basically, you got to learn about yourself. And I mean, it's hard. It is hard to look in the mirror sometimes. Um, it's our tendency to want to push that away. Uh, but without the pain and the suffering and the failure, you can't grow. You can't learn about yourself, and you can't grow.
It's
That's
true.
that's the bottom
That's
line.
true.
Um,
Wow.
the whole hospital experience. I would say that's probably my advice for people is to look in the mirror and face what you fear the most.
Wow.
So, uh, I basically come to a lot of understanding with the hospital, especially because I understood Jessica so much better and what she went through. Because instead of being the one that came to the hospital to give love, I was the one in the bed in pain every
Receiving.
day. Yeah, and receiving it, and not well, I might add, but I understood that like she was feeding off of my love to heal herself,
Mm.
and that's a real thing. Like that is an absolute real thing.
Yes.
Um, so sometimes the best you can do when somebody you love's in the hospital or dying or whatever is love them. And that's probably the most painful thing is somebody who's watching somebody go through that, is that
Hmm.
you can't help them, but you can sure love them. So
Right. Thank you so much for coming on to our podcast and sharing your story. It's really important because, some people may be going through things and they may have or are feeling some of the emotions that you were feeling before, and to see you, a living proof that you can make it through and you can overcome these obstacles and adversities is really important for people to see that and to get inspiration and motivation from your story. So we really, really appreciate you sharing your story with us. It was really important for us. As soon as, like I said, as soon as I met you and heard the story, I was like, oh, we got to share this. Um, and it's definitely something that just resonated with us dearly. So thank you for sharing it with us.
you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So we just want to say, everybody, make sure that you look out for Mike's book. He'll let us know once it's published, and hopefully we get to read one of your first few copies. We're excited
Oh
to make
shoot,
sure that
what?
we.
It's gonna be a while, but yeah, I appreciate that.
That's okay.
Y'all will
That's
definitely get your own copy for sure.
okay. We're excited about it. So thank you so much for helping us to level ourselves and for leveling others. And we look forward to seeing how you progress and develop even further. And we look forward to reading your book soon.
Thanks.
Thank
Embrace the
you,
suck,
Mike.
people. Embrace the suck.
Thank,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.